What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. I'm Scott here with Michael and Drew. As always, this is the Elder Scrolls podcast, and today we've got a little bit of a redo because we did record an entire podcast on the conspiracies that you guys sent in, but we had some audio issues, and basically we have to redo it. So
it was the best podcast we've ever done.
It was pretty
good. I
wish
you could have seen it.
It was
so
actually
good.
unironically pretty good, and I have to say to the commenter, it's Giorno. Who was it? Was it Michael? I bet it was Michael. It was Michael, wasn't it? It was Scott. So there you go.
Yeah,
Let the whole team down. But the way we're considering this, it's just like... No, I'm kidding. It's like this is just a new Calpic cycle, you know. Like in an old dimension, we recorded it, and this is a new us. This is a new all of us, including you, the audience.
It's a new podcast, new me.
A mythic thematic retelling, you know. Mantling.
And we have a whole new stream of new comments. Some may be repeats, some may be new theories, because we reposted it in the community tab. So
I didn't even realize.
Have lots to get through. Lots and lots and lots. What are we going to start with?
The one you pick, mate.
The one I pick. All right, Boldcaster. There were no audio problems. In reality, you guys are secretly being contracted as lawmasters for Bethesda, thus resulting in fewer podcasts. You guys accidentally got on a long discussion about a subject too closely related to some of your suggestions for Elder Scrolls 6. So much so that cutting out the segment would result in too short of a podcast. If I'm wrong, send proof.
Was this...
Look...
Sorry, go on.
I'm just going to say it. Okay, there's no point trying to hide it. In the last podcast, when Scott was talking a bit too close to the sun about what was happening in Elder Scrolls 6, Todd actually comes into his frame and whispers into his ear, you know, you keep that shit down or you're in trouble, mate. And unfortunately, he was in the video, so we had to delete it.
He had me by
Todd
a
is now
chokehold.
back in America.
He came out, chokehold, my eyes were like bursting like red and like my throat going purple and...
Yeah. I'm imagining more of a like SWAT team meme where they just like bust in the window behind you.
But I think, didn't we last time? I swear last time we had another sort of comment or something saying something along the same lines that were secretly working.
But this is an updated one.
Yeah, I mean...
It just goes into the conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it'd be a good... it'd be cool if it was true, but...
I just think it is a huge coincidence that our conspiracies episode gets tanked because of issues, you know.
Yeah,
it's just that there's something greater at play here.
Yeah.
Well, how about the idea from Valen that the Old Mary Dominion is actually an unknowing pawn of the surviving aliens who use it as a tool of vengeance against humans and the Empire?
This is one of my personal favorite theories. I think in a Mankar Cameron video a long time ago, we kind of got into the whole idea that perhaps the reason Mankar Cameron, you know, he's like described as a high elf, and there's the idea that maybe he was an alien who it integrated into, you know, he traveled to Valenwood when he escaped the downfall of the alien civilization, and then got embroiled in the Falmore and all of this, and then you know in the Old Mary Dominion, and it was his plan to kind of destroy Cyrodiil, ready for the Old Mary Dominion to sneak on in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he may have had his own motives at the same time, but it was also quite beneficial to the Old Mary Dominion.
But I feel like this comment is kind of saying that they like are still puppeteering them or something like that.
Oh, so like he's not actually dead.
It's an unknowing pawn of the surviving aliens. Sounds kind of like present tense to me, who use it as a tool of vengeance. I mean, like it could, you know, what you're saying could still be valid. But
it is explicitly said, you know, which is part of what I use for the Mankar theories, that specifically alien refugees integrated into like Durrani culture, into their nobility and into Somerset's nobility. So it is entirely possible.
At what point do they stop becoming aliens though? Because it's kind of like if they integrate, is it just basically a kind of high elf faction or group with like a lot of alien?
Well, they never really stopped. In a way, they never really stopped being high elves to begin with. Well, really, they just kind of took their own... I guess it's just how much they maintain their heartland culture. So, yeah, I guess theoretically, because they're high elves, they are the same thing. So you could make this conspiracy completely true.
A lot of these don't have heaps of evidence, but they're like kind of just like, maybe this is true, and it's like, yeah, maybe it is.
It's also like kind of like define like Aelid culture anyway, like because even Aelids as a whole, in terms of like you have so many different cities, a bunch of them and kingdoms of Aelid kingdoms basically aligned to certain different Daedra or so on, and like what does their version of victory mean if you're more like Baal or worshipping Hermaeus Mora, or instead if you're more like the Barsabic Aelids and you refuse the Daedra and stuff like that, or if you're loyal to Meridia, it's like what do you know what I mean? Like all of those different Daedric princes would have very different sort of end goals or sort of like motives, and it wouldn't necessarily perfectly align with a pro-elven thing. It might not be about race at all.
Yeah. I do have another theory to read that's actually also from Boldcaster, and we did read this one last time and I liked it, so I really want to bring that back in, and that is basically that this isn't mine, but the Dwemer not only used the Falmer as physical slaves, but also as a source of soul fuel for their automatons. If a man or mer is soul-trapped, they can only go in black soul gems, but the Dwemer couldn't use souls that complicated for their work. So rendering the Falmer blind and dumb was to make them, quote, subhuman, and thus a less volatile soul that can be trapped in smaller gems. They could be slaves and astral livestock at the same time. P.S. I don't think this is explicitly stated in the game, but if it is, I'm sorry for stating the obvious. Now, this is an interesting theory, especially considering as well that, like, I remember we were kind of saying that the Dwemer have all these automatons and robots that can kind of build stuff and, like, do functions anyway, so you have to wonder why they even needed the Falmer in the first place.
And on top of that, the idea that you would take a very intelligent race, you know, and then like whittle them down to being weaker souls to use to power your objects, when you could quite easily just domesticate some beast, you know, some animal that has a similar sized soul and use those souls instead. It's a lot easier than, you know, systematically poisoning a race, removing, you know, completely destroying them and in the most inhumane way possible, just so you can get weaker souls to power your automatons and whatnot. It's a bit far-fetched, but I guess that's what we want from a insane conspiracy theory.
Maybe it could have been a bit of like a flex on them, like in the same way that you can have the Dwemer with their sort of very atheistic kind of mindset. The gods are just overbloated spirits. They're nothing special, like, you know, and not treating them as these like beings worthy of like reverence or whatnot. You could have it like in the same way they kind of had like tensions with the Chimer and so on, who were very like religious and very pro worship of the Daedra and so on. It could be a bit of a flex on the sort of snow elves, sort of Oriel traditional kind of theocratic kind of system, and like there could be like a weird motivation. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like they're getting wiped out with their.
That is interesting because it is like the perfect way to like denounce the gods, is to take a race that, you know, they live under the sunlight, they, you know, they need to live in the outdoors, and they're really connected to Oriel, take them below ground and make them degenerate, and rather than these beautiful, you know, spectral white elves, you've got these stooped over blind deaf creatures, and it's just the ultimate blasphemy in a way.
Because that's the other.
It's kind of weird though, because the Dwemer, you know, are all about their gods of reason and logic. But then, like any kind of culture or individual can do, if we are to believe what you're saying is the case, this would be a very, like, not rational thing to do. It's like a big waste of resources and time just to, you know, flex.
But ego, they were like
denounce. Yeah, ego, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Thing. I don't think it's like entirely, but like even by gods of reason, logic, it's like just so people don't get confused, or at least this is how I always interpret it. It's not literal gods. It's just speaking as if those concepts are what they worship. The same way you could worship money as your, like, you know, highest good.
But myth makes reality, so
yeah. Like, let's not run away too far with that.
You'll see that in Elder Scrolls 6, there's some really cool gods. One's called Reason.
Yeah.
The other one's called Logic.
We don't want to get too
about your feelings.
Yeah, we don't want to get too irrational with these conspiracies. Come on, let's keep them grounded as they were at the start.
But still, maybe there's something worth like looking into there in the way that their actual like subjugation of the Falmer was far more like ideologically motivated and sort of like, you know, this is what your gods get you. Look at this. When you've come to us, who are better than the gods. The gods aren't going to save you from the Nords or the whatever. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it'd be a bit of an ego spin for the Dwemer. And I mean, people have done horrible things in history. They don't need genocides and all kinds of stuff. They don't need like a rational reason to do so.
No, of course not.
So
of course not. It also makes me wonder though if the fungus that the Falmer even ate was designed to do that to them, or if they just couldn't handle it because they're not a subterranean race used to eating it.
Well, yeah, I think that is something I might have mentioned last time, that, you have in real history, you have examples of, like when you've got European explorers going out to find these kind of very remote islands, say in like in the Indies, and you've got these local tribes that are really healthy and they've got their own way of doing things, and then the Europeans come along and, through no fault of anyone's really, they just bring foreign diseases over that just wipe out populations just because you're exposed to different things. So say you've got these snow elves that rely on, their equivalent of vitamin D, Magnus's magic light, and then they go underground and consume these things that are not normally in their diet, and then it messes with them completely. Well, messes with them is an understatement, but you know what I mean. So
yeah, but
that
then
is
again,
possible.
The more I think about it, it's like, I don't know, it's pretty twisted form for like malnourishment, or like you'd think if it was that poisonous, they'd just kind of die.
Yeah, after the first stomach ache, maybe they'd stop eating it, or maybe the Dwemer would stop feeding it to them. But
all right, what else do we have?
Oh god.
So it's like, just thought of this. Starfield isn't actually a game. I'm not gonna like go into that.
You've said it. I feel like now that you've said it, we kind of have to. Or is it one of those ones that really just absolutely not?
Just not about it. How about the Reaper? The Reaper is an ideal master's experiment from Killscrub. We read this one last time, and the idea is basically that after Battlespire got, attacked by Dagon, the Ideal Masters started making more things than just Mistmen and Bone Men. Like, they have the Keepers, who, they have their Dragon Bone armor kind of things, which are hard to come by. But for me, I kind of always considered that the case. Like, you don't know the origins of the Reaper, but, like, what else could it be? It's this big, giant spectral being in the Soul Can that's got not only a Daedric heart, but, like, multiple soul gems that are filled in it.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like some kind of, like, messed up experiment, I don't know, it could be.
Could be.
Hermaeus Mora is a mud crab that sought godhood.
Oh, okay. Now this one's a banger.
Damien Hockman, as the giant ones in Vardenfell did, and grew so massive, he decided to abandon the shell so he didn't have to molt. Afterwards, his form grew more chaotic, structureless limbs, eyes dispersing across his form, and occasional pincers as memories from his origins depicted in the apocryphal book Delving Pincers. It is also why the Khajiit believe he lies under the sea. Now, I don't know why specifically he'd be a mud crab, but I mean, he obviously takes on a crustacean appearance in some of his shrines, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. What do you two think? Where's your mud crab ascending to godhood evidence?
I mean, like, we have evidence that mud crabs can, whether it be through some magical intervention, have some form of intelligence. We've seen with the emperor crabs how big and powerful they can get, and then historically, you do have the idea that the subterranean races, predominantly the dregs, were much more influential and powerful in previous Kalpas and previous cycles of the universe, and obviously in the adjacent place of Lig, you had the dregs ruling over everything. So the potential that in one point in history, mud crabs might have been the predominant race, and one of those happened to turn into Hermaeus Mora, who got too big for his boots or too big for his shell. It's not impossible by Elder Scrolls standards.
Yeah, it's one of those theories that there is like, there's basically, I don't really think there's anything much to it other than like he looks like he has some crustacean-ish sort of elements, but like,
and it's not. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, you go.
I was gonna say it's not a canon text, but Kirkbride's Census of Daedra Lords. The reason that gives for Hermaeus Mora's existence is that like when they were constructing the mortal realm, he was the leftover, thrown away ideas of creation, and that kind of explains his like amorphous shape and his infinite libraries, and maybe when it was thrown away, it's kind of like his realm is at the bottom of the sea or whatever, kind of like how Lorkhan's heart is shot into the ocean where Red Mountain comes up, and that does seem like a more likely explanation than mud crabs.
It's a lot cooler as well, to be honest. Like,
All I'm thinking of is our banger of a joke last time on this topic, because we talked about werewolves and how they like morph while wearing armor, and like how if you just got trapped in a suit of armor, you'd just be like kind of like pushing into the edges and like kind of being crushed by it at the same time.
Yeah.
He's
getting
saying
too
that's
big
what
for his
Mora
shell.
did, and he's just like popping out of his shell. He's got eyeballs flying all over the place. Makes sense when you see him in Apocrypha and he just appears with massive tentacles and eyes.
Before I was like, I ended up laughing as you're talking about the last question, reading out the last question, because I'm like, oh, maybe I'll like check out like the newest ones because that'll be something fresh or something. I just like go newest comments on the post, and it's just by Alarist, and it just straight up says Farangard did 9/11. It's the first thing that just
Too much.
Never sort by new. That's just a rule for life. Never
Hey,
sort
look.
by new.
Revi Rem says, and I don't know if you two have heard of this. I think it's like Kirkbride thing, but there's a realm called like Ma. Basically, like just as Lig is an adjacent realm, there was another unmentioned counterpart to it, referred briefly to as Ma. And together they formed Ligma, which translates in common language as, what is it?
I'm not gonna ask. I'm not gonna ask what Ligma is. It's not happening.
Okay. Conspiracy.
Wait, did they mention Sarg or
no
mention of Sarg.
Not that realm.
That's a bit ridiculous.
How about from Dead Buttons? The foxes of Skyrim are aspects of Lorkhan, guiding the Dragonborn and helping them navigate through the treacherous land of Skyrim. Try it the next time you play. Pick any fox and follow it. It'll take you to treasure, to hidden dungeons and valuable loot, or sometimes even just show you convenient ways through wilderness that otherwise is hard to navigate. In the ancient Nordic pantheon, the fox represents Shor. This, I dare say, strengthens the theory that the Dragonborn is some kind of Nordic Shezareen.
I mean, that's cool, but I think he's just playing Ghost of Tsushima. He's not actually playing Skyrim, because that's what happens in that game. But really, are they not just on random walk cycles?
No, I've heard they do. I mean, this
really?
is not this is not the first time I've heard that.
Okay, I think that's a cool theory then, if that's true.
I actually think it might be.
Yeah, because I've honestly never tried following them. So,
oh no, hold on. Apparently, okay, this is very shallow research on my part. I'm reading like Google's spit out answer back. But says, no, Skyrim's foxes aren't intentionally leading you to treasure. Sadly, foxes aren't interested in loot. A myth involving Skyrim and its foxes is that they take you to places, blah, blah, blah. Look, I don't know. But I feel like if you follow a fox, which is like kind of coded to just run anywhere for long enough, it will run into an area that has a container that you can open that has stuff in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's only every it's not like there's not treasure in every second cave location under every tree in Skyrim.
Some of these gaming articles, yes, Skyrim's foxes do lead you to treasure, sort of. Like,
I mean, in a lore sense, the idea that, Shor being Lorkhan, the kind of dead god who can potentially in Skyrim almost like keep watch of the province through the eyes of foxes, and that there's the innate connection there, is kind of interesting. But obviously it's not really proven in the gameplay. It's just a cool concept.
Here is the, I'm assuming the person who designed this, like for Bethesda, basically the myth of the treasure fox is actually down to the creature's pathfinding abilities and how it was programmed to leg it from the player if it ever got spooked. He explains it in great detail, blah, 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 blah. Basically, they were designed to get frightened and run away from the player, and when they were choosing where to run, they would, thanks to a quirk of the way the map was created, head towards the parts of the map that contain the most items. Shezareen confirmed. But yeah. Hey, well, Scott, you're right there. Just checking that you're not freezing.
No.
very, very still.
Just, deer in the headlights. There was one by here called JX Editor who says he's trying not to make a theory in the form of, not just say a theory in the form of conspiracy, but he's one. Uriel Septim V is Tosh Raka. Tosh Raka being the, supposedly the Capotan character in Akavir who became a dragon and, the god of the people, those people. But,
Because, I mean, there is mention, I mean, maybe we should go into the lore of it a little bit, but there is mention from Todd Howard that there was the potential that was going to be tied into the story of Skyrim, right? Is that you have the Emperor who went across to Akavir returning with dragons or as a dragon.
That was his, like, I think it was, like, handwritten, like, conceptual notes or so on, but the idea was, he comes back with an army of dragons. So he would technically, I guess, be the rightful Emperor and stuff there if he was a living... Septum.
But I mean, the idea that he just went over there and died, I don't really buy into. I feel like it's not a very Elder Scrolls thing to happen. I feel like there'd be more purpose to it. And, you know, I'm trying to remember exactly what happens in the accounts of the battles, but the enemy seeing an emperor probably would have spared his life and, you know, picked him for information or, you know, brought them back to their society, especially once they completely routed the Imperials. The idea that the emperor would have just been killed on the spot, I don't really buy that anyway. And then obviously you have like this race of tigers that are figuring out how to turn into dragons. It's like the idea that he could be embroiled in that in some way is a bit too interesting to just chalk up to him dying.
Maybe they could have had a cool storyline where it's like you'd be led to believe it's Uriel Septim V returning and everything and all that, but it's actually like a Sayesi who was like taken his skin like a vampire kind of thing.
Who's eaten him to try and absorb his like imperial powers or his dragon blood powers or whatever.
So then he can truly, like, with the right, like, you know, precedence of being dragonborn and everything, technically come and do the like a third Akaviri invasion, but this time it will be successful because he is also like the emperor of the Rafa.
Hey, I got a theory that just makes me laugh. But Luna Athena says, I think Boris was from Oblivion was a mole. The only blade to survive the sewers. He knew where Joffrey was, etc. Not super sound reasons, but there they are. Bottom line is, I don't trust him.
I mean, well, wait.
Why not?
But wasn't Boris like... Yeah, he's like...
Of course he knows where Joffrey is.
Yeah, he's one of the Emperor's closest advisors. He's also a blade. Probably would know where Joffrey is.
And only blade to survive the sewers. You know he dies in the quest where... he can die in the quest where you take him back in the sewers. When you're doing the whole, like, infiltrating the Mythic Dawn cult thing. He becomes non-essential then. So I don't know about that take.
All right.
Unless it's kind of like a Joker at the start of the Dark Knight kind of situation where he's a mole, so he's on the Mythic Dawn side, but then once he's fulfilled his use to the Mythic Dawn, they're like, all right, now we're going to off him. We don't need him anymore. And it's just like layers upon layers of treachery.
What about this one by Kakaro Kage? Because inevitably the Dwemer are going to come into this. So the Dwemer traveled back in time to the beginning of history. That's why their origins are a mystery as well as their disappearance. They had to start all over again in the past only to get caught in an infinite time loop. Not the best theory about them, but it's something. So the idea is that like they actually like keep going back in a loop, I guess. So between like year 700, the first era, when they disappear, and then back to the start of history. And maybe that's why they're technologically advanced at that time, but they're in some sort of...
But I mean, a weird thing about time loops is wouldn't they be changing their strategy each time they go back, or do they lose all their memories?
But maybe they bought so hard into sort of reason and logic, and then sort of like by extension like uber determinism, so that they actually can't break outside the cycles because they've like rationalized away their free will or something like that, so that they go in this circular motion. They're stuck in this kind of fated loop, whereas other cultures and people who can like see outside the wheel, like just turning in the cycles or so on, have gotten Kim or those same practices, or connected to gods who are more chaotic in nature or something. And then there you go. I'm trying to work with it here.
I like it. I mean, you're doing a solid job. I'll take you onto a theory that we've actually made a video about from Palkia Pyro, saying not nearly as crazy as the other theories here, clearly. But the Silverhand were once a part of the Companions. Also really been enjoying the podcast. I've been on a long break from Elder Scrolls. Just got the itch for it last week. I've been listening to the podcast in the background at work. Good decision. Helps you stay productive, no doubt. So yes, the Silverhand are very sus. There's a lot of things about them that make you think that they were once part of the Companions, particularly their kind of reverence for Isgramor as opposed to them just being like, I want to hunt werewolves. You know, they are desperately searching or trying to get these fragments of Wuthrad, which was, you know, a giant axe owned by a kind of crazed elf murdering Atmore and Hero. And they have a chance of possessing the books, the Songs of the Return, which is about Isgramor. And obviously when you look at their actions, even like in the main story, they come in, yes, they kill Kodlak, but they kind of just run off with the fragments.
Yeah.
You know, all of their stuff seems very much to focus on Isgramor in a way, much more than you'd expect from a group that simply is like, we're going to hunt werewolves and the companions are werewolves, so we don't like them. And I mean, especially when you look at the companions and how they've kind of devolved, in a sense, from their intended kind of mission statement, if you will. Like, you know, these proud Nords who are very like pro what Isgramor would stand for. And now, you know, it's like all their top members are like lycanthropes, essentially, who have pledged their souls to Hircine. And, you know,
they're supposed to be great warriors who go to Sovngarde after death, and, you know, the companions following on from Isgramor's 500 companions. Yeah. But yeah, instead they're kind of just Daedra worshippers, essentially.
Yeah. And it all stacks
times.
up. Like there's I think it's Turfig is like one of the harbingers, and he's the first one that actually accepts this sort of like covenant with the Glenmore witches via Hircine or something like that. And he becomes the first werewolf. And he is said, according to Kodlak's journals and stuff, was like in his dreams, I think he's the last one to regret it. Like he regrets it, but from that point on, all of the subsequent like harbingers who all became lycanthropes up to Kodlak have sort of reveled in it and so on. And you can imagine that that's the split where the Silver Hand go off from the companions because they're at that time of Turfig. Yeah.
So I think it's a very likely theory that maybe Bethesda just didn't quite flesh out properly.
Yeah.
So then the Silver Hand became generic enemies in the end.
Well, there's a video on the channel called the Hidden Truth of the Silver Hand, which like goes through the whole like theory and in depth. But it is that sort of case where it does look like the companions' quest line was rather rushed. It almost feels like all of the seeds for the intentions of a sort of more in-depth Silver Hand story and fleshing out were all there, but then abandoned. And because those parts are left over, we can build theories with it. But it seems like that initially was the intention. The same way too, like when you first see Farkas turn into a werewolf, the Silver Hand surround him, and they're like, he wears that armor, he dies. And if you're not playing like with the unofficial patch mod or something like that, he's wearing just normal steel armor, so it doesn't really make sense, that whole line. But it's under the impression he's supposed to be wearing wolf armor, and then like that wolf armor is a signature companions kind of thing, and you can sort of imagine that it's the Silver Hands, not just werewolf hunters. It's like they have a particular vendetta against the companions. It's not like they're just roaming all around the place. And obviously there's also the things that sort of aren't perfect because they act like kind of bandits, but I feel like this is again a Bethesda problem, like just is, you know, poor implementation of it.
They just copy pasted bandits and changed their names.
Tears.
There's a few things like that, and you know, you'll find someone who has like bandit dialogue or something. There's a theory here from Django that says the Night Mother willingly stayed silent to cause the decline of the Dark Brotherhood. She wanted it purged down to the roots after their complacency. Once the Dark Brotherhood was fully purged, she found a new listener. I mean, it's an interesting idea in principle, but you kind of figure out that you're the listener, I suppose, quite fast. Like, it's not like the guild is purged or like the numbers culled, so to speak, at that point, right?
I guess what I thought he was saying, he meant like back in the third era, but because, you know, there wasn't a new listener chosen in the previous eras of in the previous years of the fourth era, and then all of the sanctuaries were dying off and everything was going silent.
So we're talking about the faction as a whole, not Skyrim specific.
Yeah, I think that's what
it could make sense. And I mean, that is where she is then taken to Skyrim, conveniently gets stuck on the road with Cicero.
Although wait, did they say that this was the Night Mother's ploy, or did they specifically
yeah.
But like, I feel like it's not the smartest to have so many purges to the point where you almost lose your guild entirely, when it's much more likely you could chalk it up to, you know, like, mortals just being mortals and getting paranoid and turning on each other and basically having Among Us in all of the sanctuaries makes a lot more sense than it being orchestrated by the Night Mother, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the purification itself that was done in Oblivion, you'd feel like you wouldn't want something so catastrophic to be overused as a tool in the Brotherhood.
Or especially when some of the best servants of the Dark Brotherhood get killed in the crossfire, you know.
And a lot of
Lucian the Chance.
Even the stuff too, it wasn't like a sort of like orchestrated purge. It was just sanctuaries getting caved in because of skooma trafficking wars, pirates attacked Wayrest and just blow out the sanctuary, lose contact with another one, members start getting whittled down in Cheydinhal. Like, it wasn't like a sort of calculated, like, I'm a high-ranking member coming to purge the whole sanctuary like Oblivion style. So it feels...
Maybe she was behind it all, 4D chess.
It feels more like... It just feels like, circumstances of the time had effects as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure as well what would be the real reason for that. Like, clearly if you can't... I mean, there's the idea that, like, Mephala is the Night Mother too. And Mephala likes kind of like... I mean, betrayal, and this kind of thing. But I don't think to the extent where you have to have such a, like, perfect guild with, like, nothing wrong with it. You know, it just kind of reminds me of, like, us back in 2011 or 2012, and we, like, keep deleting our Skyrim characters because they're not perfect. It's just like, you know, like, I didn't put this perk in this one thing. And, like, this was before. I mean, back in the day, you couldn't just, like, go to Apocrypha and use that thing to, like, reallocate your perks and like basically build a new character, and there was no legendary skills or anything like that where you could just bring it back down and get more perk points by like playing more. So we just delete them. We're like, it's not perfect, delete, start again, there goes 40 hours.
And with Mephala, it's always very pragmatic, you know, the use of assassination, the sex, the politics, all that. It's like, it's to achieve something for the purpose of a goal, not just, let's just kill each other, you know, because we're paranoid, and it just ends up self-destructing. You know, it's not really the way Mephala rolls.
Here's another one from Obedient Doormat. Dragons helped the Nords destroy the Snow Elves and claim Skyrim. Their servitude to Alduin afterward was a payment of sorts. So, like, I kind of like vibing that, like, that. It's kind of like, well, there's even those sort of like Isgramor was a dragon theories and stuff like that. But I feel like that kind of stacks up. Really, it would help explain how they were able to take so much land and just absolutely dominate the Snow Elves without... I mean, it diminishes the sort of like mythic Nordic hero kind of vibe of it, but that might be the case.
Well, because dragons are kind of conveniently left out a lot of the story with the companions taking over Skyrim, isn't it? It's kind of like you just see little glimpses of the Nordic heroism, and then all of a sudden they've pretty much taken Skyrim. But the idea that, you know, they've been employing the aid of the dragons, and that's a big reason why they managed to win so confidently. It makes sense, and it makes sense that they would also somewhat leave it out of their histories to make themselves look better. When
you also look at like the dragon cult and their sort of buildings and their tombs full of Draga and the dragon priests, they're spread all over Skyrim. So the dragons had a prevalent role in that sort of, at the very least, or at least post that conquest. But like they had a full spread. It's not like they were just contained to one sort of little spot and just helped here and then buggered off or something. Like, yeah.
Here's what I want to talk about. Something we discussed last time, but well, what's so funny?
I don't know, nothing. It's just like cut the conversation. Like, no, don't go on.
I mean, if you'd like to continue.
No, I just like if anyone else had anything to add on that one.
Oh, I didn't.
No, keep the ball rolling. Keep
going.
Keep the ball rolling. All right. Prophet Xander, the Orzma were the left-handed elves. First of all, Trinimac was left-handed, and so is Malakath. Source: Trinimac's statues in Elder Scrolls Online, Malakath's Daggerfall appearance and statue in Elder Scrolls Online. Left-handedness is often associated with being the other throughout history, and it was seen as a flaw. Vivek went to Yakuta, who supposedly played a part in creating a race of monsters in Sermon 17. There's a quote there about that. Vivek impaled someone in the backside and made a race of monsters. Guess who did stab a king in the back and help create a race of monsters? Mephala. The orcs and orichalcum are clearly interlinked. They smith from this metal. They wear it in a distinctive feudal Japanese style, less so in Skyrim admittedly, and it's bloody green. it's pretty clear the two are linked thematically and historically. The Orichalc Tower was in Yakuta before a great tragedy befell it and the left-handed elves. The orcs fled to Hammerfell only to be destroyed once again by the Yakutans. The reason why orcs don't have a homeland is because they've already lost it. It sank with their tower.
I mean, there are interesting elements to that, like, you know, when the Regatta come along and they just wipe out a bunch of elves because they're confused. They think it's the left-handed elves that, you know, that it reminds them of the left-handed elves, and they wipe out a load of people. Makes sense if, when they arrive in Hammerfell, they see all the goblins and maybe some orc settlements, and they're actually, you know, it's reminiscent of the orcs, the elves, that they fought back in their homeland.
But there's no reference of that, is there? Like, of them being like, oh, this reminds me of, like, this is my ancient enemy here too when I land in Hammerfell, right?
There are a lot of convenient elements, like, you know, say the left-handed thing. I mean, firstly, if you look at all of the statues of Trinimac and Malakath, most of the Malakath statues are actually right-handed. I think, you know, like Morrowind is a clear example, I think, of it being right-handed. But either way, I think when most of us think of the left-handed elves, it might not be that they're literally left-handed, but more that, like, sinistral, meaning the left side, but also kind of leads into sinister and different, and kind of like it might be a bit taboo for left-handers to exist, and it's kind of just, I don't know, like
pulling,
you know what I mean,
the
right
real
hand,
world, the left-handed thing,
yeah. So otherwise, I guess all orcs would fight left-handed in the Elder Scrolls if there was a lot of you know, there's a lot behind that theory.
It is interesting.
Have you ever tried to play a left-handed character? You put the sword in the left and the shield in the right.
Because you don't get the proper swings, do you? It's mostly stabs, isn't it?
It's not so nice. No.
It is interesting that if you have a look at Elder Scrolls lore and then try and actually look at it as not as literally true or mythological, like in the same way that we approach sometimes like cultural myths of our world about gods or heroes and stuff and certain events, and then actually trying to like contextualize that within like history, like so for like, you know, like this King Arthur, for example, is a mythological figure in England and so on, but there are kind of bits in history that could be linked, or certain series of characters or something like that that could have spawned that kind of myth and tradition. Whereas if you started using that kind of look, so like, you know, Vivek's stories about the king and or any of the stories about you know, Mephala and Boethia and so on, and like creating the orcs or something like that, if this is actually like a mythic retelling of a origin, like on Yakuta kind of thing or something like that, like thinking of myths and things as like there could be a root of truth to it, but it could also be like, you know, it's a story. It could absolutely distorted from the actual truth, rather than these myths as literally true. It could be interesting, because I know that there's one on here's another, I guess this is a conspiracy that we've been thinking about. I'm trying to do a video at one point on it, but it's kind of, you have to pull a lot of stuff together. But the dwarves are orcs, and they're same entities and so on. There's some weird occurrences, like there's basically, you know, Dumac Dwarf King, the leader of the Dwemer, he gets referenced as Dumalakath and also Dumac Dwarf Orc lots of times, sort of, and it's like, why have this kind of connection and so on. And there are kind of like theories about, like, you know, it could be that orcs was actually originally like, you know, just a derogatory term or something for enemy or something like that. But then there's also other suggestions that the whole dynamic there that happens is actually like the Trinimac Boethia Mephala kind of myth is actually a mythological retelling of what happened at that time. So with the Dwemer and the orcs and the betrayal and such between like Nerevar and Dumac and several characters there. But
even a small thing of having Volendrong conveniently, you know, a Dwemer created thing claimed by Malakath is interesting as well. It's
a really whack theory, but it will only fit in if... I just think it was interesting because it suggests the idea that instead of the whole Boethia Mephala Malakath kind of dynamic in their origin story as being literally true, it's actually a mythic retelling of a historical event that like actually happened, but it's become a thing of mythology. And so Dumac Dwarf King it became Malakath in the story, and then that's why there is this like Do Malakath sort of mention and so on. And then you would have, I think you would have like Nerevar or something as like the Boethia figure or something like that, and he's also known as son of Boethia and strongest of the Patamaics, stuff like that. So there's just it's all
because it can get confusing. It almost does seem like when there's an other race or an antagonistic race that they so often get kind of referred to as orcs. But then obviously we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think where Tolkien popularized the orcs from the poem of Beowulf, and orc or Orkneys or whatever, it's just referring to evil spirits, to kind of the adversaries. And you on Yakuda, the Yakudans, their adversaries, their orcs would have been the left-handed elves. The dwarves are orcs to other cultures, and so are the actual orcs to everyone pretty much on Tamriel, to the point where it is hard to disseminate what is the myth from what is the reality, from what is just using the term as like a way of just a derogatory term against the others and that's in your culture.
Another thing too, just like people like help accept this sort of idea as well. It's like it's very much there front and center in the games in regards to everything about Talos. Most people believe the sort of Talos from Atmora kind of thing, and he came and did X, Y, Z, but the events of the Daggerfall game really do kind of give so much credence to the whole Arcturian heresy kind of thing. Like it basically is true, like in terms of the
confirmed.
Because you experience it through gameplay events, and like and the creation really of Talos as this sort of god figure, as he's sort of like known in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. So that is an example of a mythic retelling of a historical thing, but the actual history is there's multiple figures, and it's a lot more devious and screwed up. So with that same premise, you're talking about an event that happened at the turn of the Third Era. It's like you should then treat things that happened to the First Era or the Merethic Era, like thousands of years ago, with at least the same amount of scrutiny, if not more.
It makes me wonder how many people in real world history could have been multiple people, and like just you take some credit from one person and stack it into someone else's kind of historical record.
Which to go full circle, as Scott mentioned before, with King Arthur, that's essentially what that sums up King Arthur as the legendary character perfectly. Like the French elements, the old British king who fought off the Anglo-Saxons, and all of it just all rolls into one ball of a figure.
And it's all sort of based off like archetypes too. If for a funny, like if you were to look, for example, at like take Batman as a character, right? What is the definitive sort of Batman in the 50s or something? It's like some dude with he goes in and investigates with a torch and so on, and then you come to the 2000s and stuff, and he's basically like Iron Man or something in some of the things, like with all of these crazy tech gadgets and stuff like that. So he might have originally been this, and then later, only like 50 years later, is like this crazy tech kind of thing. The character's evolved in the cultural mythology, but then if you skip forward 1,000 years ahead, like theoretically you could pretend like if Batman itself, the character, was based on like older noir detective stuff, which was then based off like some real sort of Sherlock Holmes type character, you are actually immortalizing the final iteration of a similar sort of character archetype. So then that becomes the thing that's dominant in the history thousands of years ahead, but it's divorced from the reality.
They're essentially like Chezarines of the initial archetype. So Adam West is a Chezarine.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the point you were trying to make?
Yeah. So it's just interesting how quick things can sort of change and what like the dominant cultural idea becomes as well.
Yeah.
And we've said this plenty of times before, but it is so hard for people not to transpose their current ideals, mindsets, everything onto older people or like instead of like
100%.
It's like they were just completely different. Even so many things assumptions that you take for granted. I mean, even something like property rights or the concept of property or the concept of kings or anything like that. These are built on 1,000 years long lists of assumptions on the previous kind of things, that things are just a given. Like there's an interesting idea about like just power dynamics in general, but the way we structure our entire society on a large part in expressions of power dynamics over another. So it will be like, CEO over employees, or father over children, or over wife traditionally, or things like that. And it's all of these big lists of it's basically your ability to enact violence onto someone else. So your capacity to do that, like, the traditional ideas, like, oh, you can smack your kid if they did something wrong, or you go way back and it's like you can use a stick to cane your wife or whatever. But like all of these constructions are made as expressions of like your capacity to enact violence on one another. However, that underlying principle does not have to be the basis for structuring society or so on. It's just a given assumption, because it's an assumption built on thousands and thousands of years, where it's not necessarily true for the earliest people.
I mean, I find I do this commonly, but kind of like an example to kind of drive that home in this book I'm reading about, kind of like circumnavigating the globe for the first time, where these Portuguese sailors land on a remote island where they've really had no contact with anything like it before. And all of these locals sail out to the boat on their little canoes, get on the boat with like trays full of food, and it's all happy. And then they see the captain's little skiff on the back of the boat, so this kind of really ornate looking canoe, and they're like, oh, we love that, we're going to jump in it and take it. And then they sail off in it, and the Portuguese captain's like, what? They're these thieves, they're stealing my boat. But it's like, to that so that the island actually got known to the Portuguese as the Isle of the Thieves, but really it's just they're sharers, because they have no concept of private property. We're bringing you all this food, and we're like, oh, we like that, we're going to use that, and then you come take it when you want. It's like, so taking it back to property rights, it's like the way we structure things, the way we know how things are done, can be completely different in a different corner of the world where they're not exposed to what you're exposed to.
To also just to quickly just clarify on the violence too, what I meant by that, it's not always in the most literal sense of violence, but it can be the threat of, for example, if you behave outside the law, you're going to go to jail, like forcibly or something, or even, tax, you can go full, like, but tax is a form of power exertion or violence exertion over you to keep you in a certain position or whatnot. So all of these kinds of, you can view lots of things as violence rather than just the most binary sort of thing. But as like
Talos, right?
Elder Scrolls.
This is all useful for understanding Elder Scrolls.
Look, at the end of the day, the Elder Scrolls, when you look into any aspect of the lore or of the mythologies or the religions of the races and the cultures, the parallels, as with everything, are clear with real world things. Just about it, down to the naming systems of a lot of places and gods and stuff. You can draw the parallels perfectly to real life. And like one more straight example is having Lorcan have his heart shot across the world to create Red Mountain. That's exactly the same as the story of the Greek myth of Oranos, who gets his bits cut off and thrown across the world, and all the gods spew out of that, and then where it lands, Mount Olympus shoots up. It's like, the parallels are there for everything.
Yeah, dude, even to the point where there's like, I'm pretty sure Anu as a concept, like just the primordial force, is literally just the name of a Mesopotamian god, like or Sumerian or something. It's one of them, but it's just literally they just take the name Anu. It's like, that's it. And I think it's similar in theme, but like, yeah, like you find that all over the place. Like, even Pelennor and Morra House and stuff. It's like Gilgamesh and Enkidu.
Fantasy and sci-fi resonates with us, not because it's different, but because it's similar. It's just told in a different creative way. They're all themes that we all know as people.
Yeah. But the same as like all the touchstones of like our reality they have to hit. But like for the Hermaeus Mora theory, like mud crabs, and they're like this ancient sort of endless knowledge and waters of knowledge kind of stuff. It ultimately comes down to like our sort of conceptions of like water as this primordial space. Like if you follow like evolution or something, that's how we understand it. But there, by the way, is another example of an assumption, because we know of evolution theory, and then we go back and like, we all originated in this big like, melting pot soup, and then we came onto land. That is an assumption that we will make, and it will old watery sea creatures and stuff will make us give us more feelings of like ancient stuff like that. Whereas if you go to a different society where if they believe everything came from the sky, they're going to have different conceptions or assumptions about or feelings from certain themes or things.
Oh, wait, is that Todd Howard about to come on screen to put you in a chokehold again? Get back on topic, Scott. Get back on topic.
I can't stop
Next
myself. It's the mind control takeover.
He's obsessed with real-world power structures.
Yeah.
The reason the septum has value is because you need to pay your taxes in septums.
Exactly.
Michael, restore order.
Bro.
Restore
Alright.
order now.
What's
Yes,
the defining
11S
part of a
says-
king?
No, the vigil of Stendar is kind of dumb and also
He's
not
measured.
needed.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, here we go.
No, I was just saying that, like, for example, like what makes a king a king? It's his ability to exert his will over people or whatever. It's a power.
Wait, is that a skooma pipe behind you, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks
Oh,
so.
okay.
The big long.
So, yes, 11S says the Vigil of Stendar is kind of dumb and also not needed. They dislike Daedra worshippers. That's pretty cool and righteous, right? So hate Daedra in general, so therefore they would dislike conjuration because that is the summoning of the Daedra/undead, which they probably think is evil. Their whole ideology is that Daedra are bad and should not be interacted with, but you never hear about them going into the College of Winterhold and telling the summoners to stop. Also, we don't need an all-around Daedra killer because the Silver Hand kill werewolves because they kill people. Good job. The Dawn Guard kill vampires because they kill people. Fantastic work, guys. But the Vigil is really just all-rounders who stomp out the occasional cultists, which would really be something for the Jarl and City Guards to do if the worshippers are even breaking the law. Molag Bal, Mehrunes Dagon, and so on are all bad, but Azura is generally portrayed as more well-meaning. The Vigil also haven't done anything to the Orcs, who literally live in isolation and kill outsiders because a Daedra who influenced their creations tells them to. They actually try to take out vampires and get absolutely wrecked. The Skyrim branch of the Vigil was pretty much entirely destroyed after they went after an actual threat instead of some guy worshipping Sheogorath. Why are they so bad at their job? Surely something that has roots all over Tamriel should be, I'm sure it meant to say, shouldn't be so dumb. I guess what I would say to that is kind of like, yeah, but you also have to remember that, like, I mean, yeah, maybe they are very incompetent, but there are groups all around the real world and in Tamriel who don't have to not exist because something else exists to kind of like fill a void. It's kind of like saying, oh, why does this fruit shop exist? I can also buy fruit at this shop. You know, there can be lots of different groups of, you know, people who hunt different things, and maybe their ideologies aren't always like extremely like consistent and like, you know, have no flaws in the way they think. But yeah, I mean, if you're just kind of saying they're incompetent, I'm kind of inclined to agree. Like, they don't seem to be like super great at what they do.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I guess you don't see a lot of like what they do. You only really like they're incompetent. Like, every time you see them on the road, they've killed a Daedra or something or whatever. But it's just as they, because of the Dawn Guard storyline, they get. But
have they killed
vampires.
a Daedra, or are they just fighting some Daedra? Do they always win? Like,
I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm pretty sure.
Well,
Maybe
I
there's
get-
chance
yeah.
or whatever, but.
But the idea that the Dawn Guard get like focused attention, and to an extent the Silverhand Companions dynamic does as well. We don't really know a great deal about what the Vigilance of Stendar are up to. So the idea that they're failing miserably at their jobs is
Also, it's this
a
kind
bit
of weird thing. It's
harsh.
like the Dawn Guard were a new thing. Like, they literally start with you in the DLC. The Vigilance Stendar have been around since like post-Oblivion Crisis.
then tell me why the Vigilance of Stendar came running to Fort Dawnguard for help when you first walked.
Yeah,
in.
because they get smoked.
Please help us with the vampires. We suck.
Yeah, no, of course. But like the vampires were, you know, that to be big menace, I guess. But like,
And it's funny when you look at things by scale, but you're like, oh, the Dawn Guard are new. It's like their presence in Skyrim, especially as like random occurrences, versus the Vigilance is like probably 5 times higher.
yeah. But also, we've got like patrol mods on to do better.
No,
I
even
don't
without that, the Dawn Guard do show up.
But overall, it's a real like top down. It's kind of like what makes for like shitty world building if it's too logically consistent. It's like, well, like if you were world building our world, it's like, well, eBay shouldn't exist because Amazon is there and they do the same thing. This is stupid. Like, why would you want to start this to fulfill that niche? Or like, it's the kind of like, you know, most art or things or something, people would be like, oh, Stephen King's writing. Why the hell am I going to write? It's all, he's got that covered.
Yeah,
like,
I
it's
mean,
that.
that's what I was saying at the
Yeah.
start about the fruit shop kind of idea. I mean, as Obedient Doormat came back and hopped in the comments here and said, all the Divines have knightly orders. Debella has the Knights of the Lily. Julianos has the Knights Mentor, and so on. Their main job is to protect pilgrims of their faith. It just so happens that the Stendar ones take Daedra hunting as a side job. And I'm kind of inclined to agree there in the sense that, like, I don't think they're like, you know, they're about a faith. They're like a community. You know, there's lots of different cults and communities that kind of may follow a certain deity, and a lot of their lifestyle is about doing good by this deity, not necessarily like we're the spec ops of Daedra hunting and like all day long we're like, you know, doing banish spells and like swinging around swords and preparing.
People are people, bro. They got to sit down, shit, and eat. You know, like.
Although talking about the Knightly Orders, it would be cool to see them a bit in Elder Scrolls 6, because if it's in that area of Tamriel, you know, Hammerfell, maybe a bit of High Rock, the Iliac Bay, we should see some of those Knightly Orders devoted to the Divines.
Well, like even in Hammerfell, there should still be like, and they've got things to like, they've got like stuff to build off from like even Daggerfall lore. If they just take these little obscure things and really flesh them out. And,
yeah.
Necromancy is merely a form of restoration. The only difference is the timing. I don't know about that. I don't think healing spells like you rip souls and like torment them and stuff, right?
Yeah,
I don't think there's enough lore on restoration, is there? There's not like a good amount of
There's I'm
restoration lore.
Struggling to remember the name of the character or the book they wrote, but there's a kind of a high elven character, I think in ESO, who actually is talking a lot about the potential ethics of necromancy and how it could be done effectively if regulated properly and overseen properly. But the idea that like reanimating a corpse is kind of a really extreme form of healing them. I mean, like you can understand where you start to develop that logic, even though it's probably a bit messy.
Hey, I just thought of a fantastic video idea. I'll make a video that says why restoration is a valid school of magic worthy of study. I could imagine doing that, but and you actually drop some like really good restoration lore.
I mean, seriously, like with the potential of restoration, you'd think more people would be devoting more time to it, to kind of like, if restoration is strong enough, why, like you could research it to the point where you're getting anti-death, you know, like to the point where you can prevent a character from ever dying.
It's also
I agree, but also just hold on to that thought. Is Colette Marantz like that meme well known, or am I just like too much into it? Like everyone knows the quote, like you consider restoration a valid school of magic.
But it's probably the most widespread school as well, because you have like every like chapel or church or whatever amongst the divines, and you know, even the cases that the tribunal temple and everything, like restoration. That's the thing with restoration. While it's like technically it's all just like magic and magic and so on, a lot of the time it has that kind of like connected to religion feel, if only because you have like practitioners of temples and stuff are all like doing their healing and stuff, and you go to the shrines and you can get cures for diseases from there and stuff like that.
I mean, there is a weird thing about magic in the Elder Scrolls is, if you take them away from their classifications and categories, you've got, you know, like some of the alteration spells, the idea is that you're kind of meddling with the nature of physics and the reality of the mortal realm, because magic is seeping into this finite, limited realm, and you can kind of mess with the limits by using this magic. Is restoration like a kind of magic that allows you to tap into the laws of the world and of mortality and kind of defy it to heal wounds that should be considered mortal wounds? Do you know what I mean? So
I kind of feel
the idea that you could stop yourself from dying or regrow limbs if restoration is strong enough.
Well, I guess so, because the way I would like put it, if you'll go like to, you know, alterations to alter, destroy, destruction, destroy, restore, you know, for restoration, it's like theoretically whatever like fully healed biological limit is there, really, I guess, because it would apply, I guess, to like plants and stuff. Dude, man, some magic, this is the thing with like all like high fantasy magic stuff, but like sometimes it's like, why is there crop failures or famines, like theoretically, if like restoration could be applied to that?
Yeah,
and, like,
I don't know. It kind of gets down to like, why do people swing swords if you can just shoot lightning bolts?
Well, I guess not all people can. And that's the thing.
Then not enough farmers probably could like have enough magicka to like run a whole, because you got to remember farms are to scale, right? In the like they're like made smaller in the game, but imagine a giant farm and you're just like running down the whole like strip, just like, you know, with your hands out, touching all your vegetable crops to make sure that they're like healed up and good. You'd need teams of mages running rows, and it sounds like it's quite magicka intensive, to be honest. They're better used in a healing temple of sorts.
Imagine that, a society that like measures your like you could when you just said like magic intensive, I was just thinking of like kind of like labor intensive or even like economically intensive or like money or whatever. Like if magic was always used as a form of currency.
Well, that like yeah, you do see world building in a lot of book series where magic does tie into the economy. I mean, it ties into absolutely everything, and that is one thing about having a soft magic system like the Elder Scrolls is one. If you start to put too much logic into it, and if we start to break it down too much, it kind of unravels, because really magic would have an infinite impact on every aspect of the universe, wouldn't it? To the point where like there would be nothing relatable about the way these people exist.
Yeah, because you
There's
can
just so many uses.
You could change like one thing, and it could dramatically just. I mean, simply put, like if someone can throw a fireball, building out of wood is going to be a whole lot less attractive when someone can burn down your entire village by like just because it's. I know before, obviously, you can just throw torches or stuff or so on, but if you can literally just stream fire like a dragon, or like
That's why I wasn't a huge fan of some of the dragon shouts, actually. Because a lot of them were just like, mages can do this. Like, it was cool that it didn't cost magicka and that a warrior could kind of just like shoot out some fire from their mouth. Really cool. But like, I wish there were more of the unique effects that couldn't just be like thought of as, like at least ice form encapsulated someone in ice.
See, there's another thing, man. What about like, why do you need to salt your meat, man? You can make freezers. Go underground in a cellar, put some ice magic up. You're nice deep in underground, and you've got yourself a.
I guess the only way you can really stop this rabbit hole, because you could say the same, like why cook meat on a fire when you can just roast it in your hand? I guess access to magic is really the only way of limiting it, by making it extremely difficult
but Balgruff
to
with a
learn
court
or extremely
wizard,
expensive.
like
But also, like, what fridges are you talking about? There are none.
No, but
like,
you build one if you made a cellar deep
theoretically.
enough, and then you can just spawn ice, which is freezing.
But the ice has to last. Like, maybe that's actually really hard. I mean, it does fade away after a certain amount of time.
But you will retain a lot of cold in there if it's like all.
Oh yeah, I mean, they
insulated for a
actually
while.
do use. You want to have some world building knowledge of the Elder Scrolls. Some people do use ice wraith teeth.
Yeah.
To kind of like put around their alchemical ingredients and keep them fresh.
Yeah.
Huh, that's cool.
But it's like not a super widespread thing. But if you know, you know.
Yeah, I guess to end that, it's like having magic be hard to access or extremely time or cost effective, or like not cost effective,
or
is really the only way to make it to make sense. Really, is that not many people can actually channel it properly. Otherwise,
kind of, I feel like the law always. If you took the law as it is, there would be less magic users as per like part of the population as you would see in like Skyrim. Because I mean, it's like if you took even like same as demographics, like it shouldn't be like 50% Nords and the mix of everything else. But if you took a realistic example, you would need thousands and thousands and thousands of Nords. But you don't want a game where there's like, if you did strict percentage like that, but you're confined to only 1,000 NPCs, where you'd have like one Dark Elf or one Khajiit or whatever. So obviously like all of, them and then mages and stuff, they're all going to be overrepresented for the sake of gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be as fun if they were underrepresented.
Yeah, of course.
It could make them feel more special, but yeah, definitely not as fun. There is one theory I really want to read from Marceline Fox, and it says, all 3 FudgeMuppet members sleep in the same bed like the Powerpuff Girls.
That's a fan fiction waiting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we do, as one of the comments asks, what are their color combinations, and do they sleep in the same placement as their webcams? That would put you in the middle, Drew.
Yeah.
And Scott, whatever colors you put around us, make sure they're Powerpuff.
I forget.
It's not a sandwich I want to be a part of, I'm afraid.
I forget the name. I only can think of Bubbles, the blue one. What are the...
Oh, he knows.
Yeah, I have a sister, bro. Of course I know, bro. The Powerpuff Girls movie, the one with the... I've seen it plenty of times. So I've literally forgotten though the green one and the red, pink.
I don't know. Find
which
out.
one's
You
which?
can
Put
change
the
our
names.
names on the podcast instead of
Yeah.
Michael, Scott, and Drew. All right. Anyone else got some theories to cover?
Nah.
We're all out.
I think I'm all out of tinfoil.
The real
I
conspiracy.
mean, there were a lot of theories.
Yeah.
So it could be revisited.
For sure.
And there's some from last time that we didn't touch on this time, so can always bring them back.
Oh, just a quick thing. for the audience, make sure that your conspiracies are conspiracies. So do leave some in the comments. Don't just do theories like this god's that. Like, put a more like conspiratorial element to it.
It needs
you know? Like,
more of the sort of aliens built the pyramids energy. Like, that's the kind of stuff. Like, conspiracy as in it sort of feels like a bit like a cover-up and the
Yeah,
ramifications
there are people
of
in
it.
on it.
Yeah.
And things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. Social media links are in the description, and we look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.